So guys, this is a really important subject. I have seen two people cover it, Steve, and then also Ryan Christian as well. So, but everybody else hasn't really been covering it. I know Glory put up a thread. I think I might have put some of that in here. So Klaus Schwab was at the World Economic Forum at Davos, and he introduced Xi Jinping. Now, before we get into Klaus Schwab, I want to put up Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett is, of course, new leader of Israel, right? New prime minister of Israel. And some of the things he said were extremely troubling, not just obviously from an anti-imperialist standpoint, but also from the global capitalist standpoint with technology and, of course, the defense. Now, let's listen to a couple of things he said. I wanted to put so much more, but I wanted to not spend all day and make it short. But do check out Glory's thread, because it's a thread that basically has pretty much most of what he said. So in this tweet, we're going to hear how he talks about the pandemic being all about data and the fusion of information technology with medical data, as if that's a good thing. So let's listen to what he says.
Using information technology with pandemics and medicine. The pandemic is all about data, information, and gleaning insights from that data. And for example, I was the first during the Omicron wave to shut the skies for a while, for a few weeks. I did that. I wanted to buy time and see what's happening in other countries, and then using their data, be able to form the correct policy. Now that we know that the Omicron is much less lethal than its predecessors, we developed a strategy that acknowledges that and allows Israel to continue operating, albeit at a lower pace for a few weeks. So I see one big area, the fusion of information technology and data and medical data in order to glean actionable insights. The second area I see is way beyond medicine. The world is going remote. This sort of event, having the Davos summit, through the internet was unheard of a few years ago, and now it's almost natural. That means that the world is going to depend more and more on remote working. This provides a huge opportunity for Israel, which is we've sort of exhausted most of our talent to employ foreign employees from Eastern Europe, from India in our companies to a much easier extent. And finally, it means that the world, as the world becomes more dependent on remote methodology, it means that we're also going to be more vulnerable to cyber attacks, which means we need good cyber defense. And Israel has massively invested in cyber defense technologies. And I believe roughly half or almost half of the global investments in cyber companies over the past few years have been in Israel. So Israel has become a powerhouse in cyber defense.
Bam.
Bam.
Bam. Oh my God! Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to?
You go.
Make it simple and quick, because I like to hear what you have to say on this, because in my mind I'm going. Well, first of all, it's not Omicron is not like its predecessors, because it's not from its predecessors. It's a whole different strand. And if you're looking at data and information, you would know that. Too many people don't know that, and they don't talk about that. That's why I am like at another level of being pissed off when it comes to this whole situation, because nobody's really talking where Omicron is coming from. Secondly, the fact that he's pushing this kind of like global agenda of like staying separated, working from home, like bringing in other people into the other countries, other cheap labor from other areas. It's just mind-boggling. And I hope the people of Israel really kind of stand up for this. And, and then finally, when you tie together the whole like data, it depends on which, where, and how you get your data from. You can use whatever data you want to manipulate anything, but he's openly talking about instructions and rules from Davos, fam. Like, he's literally just laying it out on the table right now. At what point do we as citizens go, Are they messing with us right now? Are they really screwing with us that much that they're giving us this much information, putting this stuff on paper in front of us? Do they want us to hear this information? What do they want to happen over here? It's ridiculous. And you know damn well, fam, the West, they might have moved your boy Netanyahu, but they're not going to replace him with somebody who's not going to play ball. This guy is going to play ball. He's continued to play ball. He's just another globalist. And Israel's going to have to take care of themselves. The citizens of Israel is going to have to realize what's going on.
Right. By all accounts, Bennett is worse, actually, even than Netanyahu. So in terms of what really worried me is Israel has been positioning itself, with the help of the United States and the West, of course, as being extremely involved in defense, surveillance, and technologies within those industries. So they're just basically reiterating that they're going to be extremely involved in that, and they're going to be there for when perhaps we or somebody within our vicinity experiences a cyber attack where, let's say, we would all lose the internet. Well, we just rely on Israel. Israel, remember, has the cloud access. They have so much money invested in this and so much power that they're basically positioning themselves as a co-partner with the U.S. intelligence when it comes to, I think, surveillance. And when he talks about remote, how this pandemic has opened opportunities for people to work remotely, the reason they say this blatantly is because they paint it as this is something good. The whole thing on Davos since 2016 and on even before that has been about making things easier, making us closer together via the internet. But really what this pandemic has been doing is driving people apart and using the virtual world to replace those human connections. And so what we're seeing is a reiteration and a re-emphasis of that in those terms, because you're seeing them hyper focus on, oh yes, you can remote learn, remote work, and it's going to be cool and it's going to be that. But really, when you do that, you lose a human to human interaction. And so they're really pushing this whole thing where people aren't going to be physically connected. And this is also why they're doing it online, because of the quote unquote pandemic. So they're kind of just letting you know what's to come. And I also just wanted to share this second video.
Because I forgot to say it. Just something else that's really important to pay attention to. They're now telling you who the new enemy is: hackers. Okay, that's code for you, the people out there. Like they call Julian Assange like a hacker. They're saying that he encouraged Chelsea Manning to hack into information and send it. That's what they're doing. Even in Hollywood, me and Steve talked about this on his morning show the other day. They're making movies like this where different aspects of the CIA and intelligence agencies around the globe, like China, there was like a U.S., a British one, and a Chinese spy, a Colombian spy. You know, they all are joining together to fight the great threat now, which is not nation states. Now it's hackers, just human beings trying to find information and get it out to we the people. That's who the new enemy is now, ladies and gentlemen. It's you. That's what they're, because by any means they can make anybody a hacker. Look what they're saying about Julian Assange. This is the new enemy. This is what I'm saying, that the intelligence communities and the oligarchs have run wild, and they are now making us the enemy.
I 100% agree. Absolutely. And then this next one is just a shorter video about how they're talking about Palestine. Now, notice how they refer to Palestinians. And this one is, of course, I think is going to get a lot of people up in arms. He talks about helping Palestinians, but also deems them terrorists. So let's just hear what he says.
Through business, through economy, through jobs, it's the most sustainable way to bring stability. I'm promoting and support industrial zones, joint industrial zones, Palestinian Israelis, allowing Palestinians to work in the very advanced Israeli high-tech sector, increasing trade between Jordan and the PA. So basically, my approach is all in on economy. At the same time, though, we have to be cognizant of the fact that there's always a meaningful terror threat from the Palestinians to Israel. We've seen it time and again, even in the past few weeks. We've had some terror events. So I want to be very clear about that. I will not do anything that could hinder or threaten Israel's security or weaken our ability to defend ourselves by ourselves. Ultimately, the Palestinians have a big choice to make, whether they want to go down the path of terror or the path of peace and prosperity. Ultimately, that's their choice to make. I just want them to know that we here are very positive about prosperity and people-to-people peace.
Fam, they got choices, fam. They got choices, fam, right? You could stay there and be bombed and be happy with it, or you can get even more jumpier and we'll use more advanced technology to bomb the shit out of you, fam.
Right. And so again, they're saying he's telling people he's going to welcome Palestinians into this sector. Again, this sector is working for who? This sector is going to work for intelligence, for the surveillance state. And of course, you know, this is Israel, but Israel wouldn't be Israel without the US. And so when you hear these things, these words come out of his mouth, and then of course saying, well, Palestinians we're going to defend ourselves without any regard to be how Palestinians are treated right now in an open air prison where they're constantly terrorized. They don't have access to water. They live in a very disastrous state of very little humanity. And they don't, there's no mention of that. Right. And then you just see them being used. Here are the opportunities that you have to contribute to the empire. Or that's your choice, right? If you want to contribute to the empire. So once again, reiterating this intelligence. And then he goes on to say, I'm not going to play the video, but he goes on to call Iran and the octopus of terror and instability, which is hilarious because what is the West? What is Israel? What is the United States that have constantly bombed, droned, and sanctioned these nations in Central and West Asia? So it's just one gigantic gaslight that we're hearing from this guy. But this isn't even the worst of what we're gonna hear of what from these people. But can
I say this much too, that when it comes to the Western presidents, when it comes to the United States president, every single president has just handed off like a baton, once again, like running a relay race from where the last president was. You know, everybody's been, Joe Biden, I am a Zionist, remember? If there wasn't an Israel, we had to create one. And Donald Trump was just Israel's bitch, ladies and gentlemen, just did whatever for them. So that's why we're here at this state right now. And there's a lot of conservatives out there, a lot of patriots now who kind of have the same kind of feelings towards the Palestinian because of the mainstream media, because of the government, because of that same narrative that it's the Israelis that are under attack from the Palestinians and not vice versa. You know what I'm saying? And look, I know a lot of people when they talk about the situation, some people are like, they want to they don't want to recognize Israel. They don't want to do ever. All I care about right now more than anything is that the bombing and the killing stops. Stop, and fix the Gaza situation. Stop with this whole situation where you're starving these people you're keeping them from water and everything else. This is not hidden anymore. Everybody knows this now, right? Enough is enough. Moving forward, let's find a peaceful resolution. That's what I want more than anything. And we're not even acknowledging that the Palestinians are the victims here. They are.
So, fam, just moving right along into the next speaker, Klaus Schwab, our good friend, the son of a Nazi. He is, of course, the one behind, Klaus. He is the son of a Nazi. And I say that not lightly. I say that because some people think that he's a good guy. Some people are even saying, well, he might not be as bad. He's bringing in Xi Jinping. Now, we are obviously anti-imperialist. Every time the U.S. tries to foment some sort of manufacture consent to attack China in some ways, or even from the right where they say, oh, the Chinese virus and all these things, we don't condone that. We haven't seen China be an empire quite yet. They are a superpower, right? But they're not necessarily an empire. They don't have military bases all over the world like we do. Their relationship with other nations seems to be one of cooperation. Thus far, not all, from what we know, but the vast majority, at least in Latin America with Bolivia, they helped a lot of Bolivia redo their infrastructure, get infrastructure for the first time. So it's some of these things have been happening. Now, am I suspect of a lot of centralized power? Absolutely, 100%. It's something you should always watch. You can both criticize or be vigilant about the power China has and is increasing, but also say they've gotten their people out of poverty. They've largely been able to create a population that has money to spend. So I think there's a lot of nuance to this situation, and I think we would be hypocritical if we didn't talk about this. Does it worry me that Klaus Schwab's invited the CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping as a keynote speaker and that he accepted? Yes, it does, because this summit pretty much to me is a summit of global capitalism, of people that are going to try to privatize everything for the 1% predator class. If China's motto has been to eradicate poverty, is this somehow like going really in line with your principles? Maybe at the surface. But what you really have to understand is these people are not on your side. Now, let's listen to what Klaus Schwab said when he introduced CCP General Xi Jinping.
China has made significant economic and social achievements under your leadership. In the first 3 quarters of 2021, China's economy grew by over 9%. You have achieved a historic goal to become a moderately prosperous society in all respects. Mr. President, I strongly echo your remarks in 2017 that mankind has made progress by surmounting difficulties, and when encountering difficulties, we should join hands and rise to the challenge. I believe this is the best time for leaders to come together and work jointly for the world to become more inclusive, more sustainable, and more prosperous. We now welcome His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China.
尊敬的施瓦布主席
Professor Klaus Schwab, ladies and gentlemen, friends, greetings to you all. It is my pleasure to attend this virtual session of the World Economic Forum. In 2 weeks' time, China will celebrate the advent of spring in the Lunar New Year, the year of the tiger. In Chinese culture, tiger symbolizes bravery and strength, as the Chinese people often refer to spirited dragon and dynamic tiger, or soaring dragon and leaping tiger. To meet the severe challenges facing humanity, we must add wings to the tiger and act with the courage and strength of the tiger to overcome all obstacles on our way forward. We must do everything necessary to clear the shadow of the pandemic and boost economic and social recovery and development, so that the sunshine of hope may light up the future of humanity.
Bam. Be careful what you say after this, because you're going to piss off Danny Haiphong, Carl Zah, and Ben Rubenstein. And it's funny because I think you've gotten a lot of criticism on the other end, and we remember this stuff. Remember a couple years ago when I was talking about China and people were like, Pasta, you can't have the Convo Couch in China, because we had this kind of like militaristic kind of enemy view of what China is, right? It wasn't really talked about. A lot of people didn't understand China. I think, though, right now, what we're trying to do is find a common ground in between, because we pointed this out. Pointed this out on Steve's show the other day. You mentioned all these things that China was able to accomplish, from removing people from poverty, the fact that they don't go around with a missile, they go around with a checkbook instead. However, this has got to be a little concerning when you see Xi Jinping walking arm in arm with Klaus Schwab, no?
Right. So in my opinion, there is a lot of nuance to the situation. I don't think it's as cut and dry as if you see somebody there, specifically a world power. I see people like Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum. They understand what's happening here. They know what time it is. China is having the upper hand now. You can't ignore them. the West can no longer ignore China. We're shifting into an era, as Mark just said, a bipolar era, bilateral era. We're not anymore under the unilateral type of Western dominated era. That is no longer the case. And the United States knows it, the West knows it, Klaus Schwab knows it. So I think this is in an effort to entice the East and entice China, because it's not like we don't know that China is diametrically opposed to the United States right now in terms of empire, in terms of imperialism, in terms of their political ideologies, right? However, by the same token, China is also going to, I think, because they are an increasing superpower and because they do still have a class difference within China. I mean, you still have a hierarchical type of structure in terms of the political dominance of Xi Jinping and certain emperors. That's always been part of the culture, though. That's part of who China has been for centuries. So that's nothing new. So you have this whole, I think, from Xi Jinping, I think they are proceeding with caution. I don't necessarily know the intricacies within what's happening behind closed doors in China, but I do know that they're a largely collective type of nation where these people tend to believe in the government. They tend to rely on what their government does and says, but there's also diplomacy at the helm. So there will be times when you see, I mean, we had Juan Orlando Hernandez at the inauguration for Daniel Ortega. Like when we were there, and Johnny was like, why is Juan Orlando Hernandez there? Oh, because he's still the president of Honduras until Zomar's inauguration on the 27th, and they want to open a relationship between Honduras and Nicaragua. So while Juan Orlando Hernandez was there, and he wasn't well liked by a lot of the people from Honduras who were there to view this inauguration, while he's absolutely one of the most hated individuals in Central America, they were like, well, it's diplomacy. They're trying to get something done. They need the approval of Honduras, so they're doing it. We don't like it, but that's what it is. So I think there's a little bit of that playing at both sides. I think it's something that we should watch, specifically us in independent media, people who are, we're understanding that people like Klaus Schwab and these 1% billionaires, at the end of the day, this is a class issue. Perhaps the classes of these nation states have far more in common than we do. Just because China as a whole has lifted people out of poverty doesn't mean that there aren't politicians there that need to
or oligarchs
protect their own interests. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I feel like they have their own oligarchs. I feel that Steve said it best. This isn't about nation states. And it's funny, I had an argument, a little debate with a friend of mine about them trying to blame the Wuhan virus on China. Like this was China who let out a weapon. Like, no, this isn't about nation states anymore. Just follow the money, just follow the chains. And you can see that, Eco Alliance Health and, Fauci and other entities have been doing this gain of function testing with Western funding for a long, long time. You look at the ties with DARPA, everything that's involved. This isn't, in my mind, about nation states. And same thing over here. This is about oligarchs and elites all over the globe trying to run things together. And I think you're right. Like the people of these nation states, people in the United States, the everyday people in China, you know what I'm saying? And like you said, I think the reason why they've been so willing to go along with things is because the Chinese government has lifted a lot of people out of poverty and given them a living. Listen, nowadays, where it used to be where Nike and Under Armour used to go into countries like China and have factories, they're moving out because the Chinese worker is now making way more and too much to save that money for cheap labor. They're moving into Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia to make these particular types of materials or products because the level of income has risen in China too fast for the United States. So it's just something to keep an eye on. But when you see it coming out of the World Economic Forum, you got to be very cautious of it. And I also don't want to piss up Caleb too, because I know Caleb's a big fan of Xi Jinping. But there are a lot of suspicious things going on, especially when he's going hand in hand with Klaus Schwab. Fam, go ahead and continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and you're right. And the pandemic as well. I mean, their response to the pandemic was far better than ours, but also their ideology and the way people behave and the way people feel about their government is also entirely different. So when people say, well, we could have done what China did, no, you couldn't have, because we're an entirely different country. We have a completely different political climate right now. People aren't being lifted out of poverty. They're being driven into poverty. So you have these, oppositions, and then you have the issue of class, Pasta. And at the end of the day, and I've said it many times, these politicians are going to be politicians first. These politicians are going to take care of their interests. And if they belong to a certain class of the 1%, they're going to take care of that. Now, it depends on how much of the individuals, the working class of these states, of these nation states see it. But we see it because we're not experiencing any of these sort of gains in terms of it. And the people who are victims of our imperialism, they see it because they have no choice, because they're experiencing the results of resource extraction and deprivation and sanctions. So I think it's something that we should watch. I think it's something to be critical of. I also think that it's kind of, for me, it's just class, right? At the end of the day, am I going to be a fan of Xi Jinping? No, I'm not. I've never been a fan of like any of these. I mean, how do you trust them, right? How do you trust any one particular politician? The only thing you can look at is what they have done for their people. And that's what I look at when I look at China. People are being lifted out of poverty. They do have money. Do they have a social credit score? Yeah. Would I necessarily want to live in a country that has a centralized power like that? No. This is why I like countries like Nicaragua that respect a more decentralized structure, that have autonomous regions where people can, have their own co-ops and do their own thing. And I would rather be in countries like that than in countries with centralized power. But that's just me. I mean, if people want to live in China and love China and are happy with the government, that's up to them. I'm not here to impose my own beliefs, my own ideology on other people. And I think so many people do that from both ends of the spectrum. So
how different are we in the West, though, too? Like, we don't have a social credit score. We have a financial credit score. Like, you can't do anything unless they take how much are you worth, dollars and cents? It's not that different. It's not that far off. It's a different type of good playing citizen. And also, to the way that China did handle the pandemic, that's something that's going to leave the door open for a lot of people to trust their government, because they handled it in a better way. They did have a big, crazy authoritarian lockdown, but they actually used therapeutics and saved people's lives. That's the big difference in China from what we saw over here, where it was just a mass ball of confusion, and wherever we're at right now. I don't want to speak too much.
Yeah, and well, they don't view it as authoritarian. The vast majority of people there don't view it as authoritarian. They view it as a collectivist thing you do because it was necessary, and they trust their government. We don't. So this person, I wanted to point out what they said because I thought it was relevant. They said, China working with the World Economic Forum and the WHO and taking them seriously is like Russia trying to work with NATO. The people calling the shots at the WEF are enemies to China. They just want access to China's money and their 1.4 billion person market. What I mentioned earlier is that I do think they see the writing on the wall. I think they see that China is up on the up while we're on the down. And so they're trying to play nice with China to get access to this money. And I do think profit and access and power is always a motive. So just on that. And Fam,
I disagree with this right here. I don't know necessarily if that's true, whatnot. It's not like Russia trying to work with NATO, because they are working together. They're talking hand in hand, like they're working hand in hand. So we don't know for sure if that is necessarily the situation. I know what this person's saying, but we also have to look at the way James Corbett wrote about this when he talked about Henry Kissinger back in the days, how they brought China into the fold, and where Mao had some of his schooling from, you know what I'm saying? So let's not think that this is 100 necessarily true. I don't necessarily believe what this gentleman just said. However, it is food for thought. Just want to point that out.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a for-profit motive, though, perhaps on both ends, especially on the World Economic Forum's end, though. I think they see that the power that China is gaining every single day. So that's what I agree with. So here's Fauci. He's your favorite. So he was there and he said a few words about disinformation. Let's listen to what he said.
One of the things that I believe the entire world is facing, but we certainly are facing it in a very, very disconcerting way in the United States, is the amount of disinformation that is accompanying what should be a problem where everyone pulls together against the common enemy, which is the virus. We have disinformation that is entirely destructive to a comprehensive public health endeavor.
Yeah. So
I'm about to lose my lunch over here. This is disgusting. Go ahead. I mean,
no, we can
God.
discuss more on Rokfin only.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this sort of thing that he's doing is, of course, playing right in line with the World Economic Forum. Because quickly, I want to go through a couple of really, really worrisome things that there. So this is the I think she is the executive director of the Ethereum Foundation. She's also at the World Economic Forum, and you can see she's the Aya Miyaguchi and Vitalik Buterin, the co-founder of Ethereum, both at the World Economic Forum. So fam, I don't know, talk to your Bitcoiners. Not a good look for.
Don't get too confused, because one of them staying at proof of work. Ethereum is moving to proof of stake, right? So they're moving away from the fact that the miners can control the whole system and bringing it into more centralized kind of a sphere, and that is a cause for concern. That's why at the end of the day that we always say Bitcoin is king, because it's completely decentralized, where they're trying to make Ethereum centralized, and that is a big problem and something we have to look for down the road. I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me over here, but that is a cause for concern, the fact that they're at the World Economic Forum.
Right, and then you have this comment by the by Vitalik Buterin, the co-founder of Ethereum, where they were talking about somebody who said we should be investing in technology that makes having kids much faster, easier, cheaper, more accessible, synthetic wombs. And somebody said this is an awful idea. Synthetic wombs for what? Why take on the risks? And he says disparities in economic success between men and women are far larger once marriage children enter the picture. Synthetic wombs would remove the high burden of pregnancy, significantly reducing inequality. I think a lot of people are going to have moral and ethical concerns with that. It's a little bit like the transhumanism that the World Economic Forum has been advocating for. So no surprise that these people are there. I just wanted to point that out. Now, this is kind of, we've kind of talked about this, but I think it's worth repeating, especially in the context of what we just saw, some of the things we saw at the World Economic Forum of this year. This is how they have framed the pandemic. This is what they say: never let a crisis go to waste. And they kind of talk about just a more surveilled type of state. Let's watch the video. Bam.
Fam, what pandemic era changes will be permanent? You know, like you talked about never lose the opportunity to take advantage of a good disaster or a good crisis. It's, well, at what point are you now causing the crisis because you take advantage of the other crises so much? Well, why don't you just start causing your own crisis so you can kind of steer the world in whatever direction you want? It's obvious at this point that they want to keep us separate, keep away from each other.
Yeah, so from the onset of this pandemic, many of us said that this pandemic was just a Trojan horse for the surveillance state, just like it's been with every other issue from 9/11 to January 6th to now. And so what we're seeing is them telling you straight up that, yes, some of these measures that you thought you were going to go back to normal, that you were just doing this because you wanted to get your freedom back, whatever the case may be, some of these things are never going to come back. And they're flat out telling you, but they're making it seem like it's your choice. And that is a very, very clear sign of intelligence type of formulations and algorithms, because they make you choose and demand these measures, just like, you know, what we see on the US left demanding lockdowns, right? Demanding mandates, demanding separations and segregations, things they never would have demanded had they not been made to believe that they wanted these things. And so what we're seeing is the push to, as Pasta just said, separate people, but under the guise of, this is great, look how easy and accessible we're making this. It's once again that whole accessibility thing, right? When they put this accessibility, they're like, this is so accessible, this is great. You don't even need a facial recognition. It's going to be your heartbeat now. So your heartbeat, like, does that not worry anybody that you can like be identified via your heartbeat? So you'd have to be dead to like perhaps get some privacy. I mean, I don't think we're going to win the battle against technology, but technology right now is on the hands of very, 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 very evil people and a very corrupt oligarchy. So how am I going to be comfortable with that? And it's just really scary that more people have believed that this is some sort of conspiracy. There are literal videos we just showed you of people saying these things, and you can pretend that it's something good and favorable to the working class when a bunch of billionaires get together and a lot of people with power get together and they're deciding things. You can pretend that it's in your best interest, or you can be a realist, a real person living in the real world, and see that it has never been that way and it will never be that way, because you are disposable and you are only necessary to what you can produce in this society. And so,
then
yeah,
what
I don't know if you have anything more.
Recognize it. What then next?
Right, right.
Mm.
So, and you know, this gets further weird because I found this. This person said that they deleted this article that they had put up in 2017. Welcome to 2030. This is about Agenda 2030. This is a real thing that the World Economic Forum put out. I know this has been framed. This is a real thing they put out. They put out this article. It was everywhere. And they said, I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. And I have my theory about why they're doing this. But they put out this article, then they deleted it because they got so much backlash. And if you go on the link and you click on it, you'll get this. Sorry, but we can't find the page you were looking for anymore. So if you go on the link from the World Economic Forum, they deleted it. But if you go back to the Wayback Machine and you see it, you can see that it was there. And of course, that was deleted recently, by the way. So what I did was found the article in another medium, the Forbes, and I'm going to read some of this article because if you guys are going to freak out when I read this article, right? So I'm just going to read a little bit of it. And let me just, there's like an ad here. Hold on. Okay. So they say, welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say our city? I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, all the things we need. One by one, all those things became free, so it ended up not making sense for us to own much. Communication became digitized and free, energy free. Things started to move quickly. Transportation dropped dramatically in price. It made no sense for us to own cars. We could call a driverless vehicle or a flying car for longer journeys immediately. Public transport, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I use my bike. I enjoy exercise on the bike, blah, blah, blah. And then they talk about we don't pay any rent. Someone else is using our free space whenever we do not need it. My living room is used for business meetings when I am not there. Once in a while, I will choose to cook for myself. It is easy. The necessary kitchen equipment is delivered at my door within minutes. Since transport became free, we stopped having all those things stuffed into our home. Why keep a pasta maker and a crepe cooker crammed into our cupboards when we can just order them when we need them? And so blah, blah, blah. The economy is easier. And so he goes on to talk about shopping. We don't need shopping. And then they later on in the paragraph, they said when AI and robots took over much of our work, we suddenly had time to eat well, sleep well, and spend time with other people. The concept of rush hour makes no sense anymore, since the work we can do can be done at any time. I don't really know if I would call it work anymore. It's more like thinking time, creation time, and development time. For a while, everything was turned into entertainment and people did not want to bother themselves with difficult issues. It was only at the last minute that we found out how to use all these new technologies for better purposes than just killing time. Okay. And this last paragraph that I wanted to read, my biggest concern is that all people who do not live in our city, those we lost on the way, those who decided that it became too much, all this technology, those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over big parts of our jobs, those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. They live different kinds of lives outside the city. Some have formed little self-supplying communities. Others just stayed in the empty and abandoned houses in small 19th century villages. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere everything I do, think, and dream is recorded. I just hope that nobody will use it against me. All in all, it is a good life. Okay, so I want to hear your reaction, and I invite everybody to read that. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat right now, this link, so you guys can read it, because it is very, to me, this is extremely frightening, and it's extremely gaslighting.
I like to look at the nuance of it, right? Like the psychology of it. And it really starts to me when they talk about a pasta maker, right? Not because my name is Pasta, but obviously, you guys have seen pictures of me before. You know, we've had friends come over and make pasta. You know, there's a reason why, you know, Italians get together and they make pasta, whatnot. It's a form of family. It's a form of community. It's a form of doing something together with your hands, just simple stuff, loving, whatnot. It's a connection, really, to tell you the truth. You know, our good friend Mikey's Treasure says, any place that has fresh pasta, I'll go there and eat, right? Because it comes from the heart. It seems like they're trying to dehumanize us, right? We talk about the transhumanism of things, you know, the mixing AI with humans of sorts together, and that is what's coming. You know, why do this when you can have it sent right to you, when you can have it brought right to you and stuff? So, I mean, I just look at the deepness and the nuance, and when you have these articles out here, this is very similar to what we were reading the other day when it came to the lockstep documentation, right? Almost planning out 11 years before it happened what happened. And really, to tell you the truth, fam, this is where I kind of get stuck, right? Because I don't know what the solution is. The other day on the Union of the Unwanted, I said I'm losing hope, because it seems like they have us, the majority of the masses, hypnotized, you know, right? They kind of like pushed in the direction where it's just somewhat inhuman, and people are accepting it. There are so many sheep in the flock that you're just following. Even watching some of our old progressive friends nowadays, the way they've been talking about this whole situation, it's mind-blowing, because they're so willing to just fall in line with the masses and follow the lead of big technology and big power. So when things like this are written, it becomes quite frightening. And I don't know what the solution is, but I know what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to love and live life every step of the way. I'm not going to take the simple things for granted anymore. The times with the family, the times together, the emotions. I'm going to make sure that I enjoy the journey just as much as the end results when we get there. And that is important as humans, because we should be pushing against this type of kind of plan And that's what it is. This is a plan to get humans to a certain directions. Some of us really honestly believe that there is a predator ruling class that doesn't care about us, that doesn't want us here anymore, that we're a pain in the ass, we're extra mouths to feed. So it's how we treat each other as humans and what we decide to do moving forward that's going to be the most important thing. And that is not let go of those simple things in life. You know what I'm saying? I hate to sound like a fairy tale over here, fam, but love will conquer all. You know, humans are meant to get together, socialize, and be community. And that's what we need to do again. Be community. You know, resist the urge to have everything just done in your own bubble by yourself, you know, to stay at home and never kind of mix with other humans. That's what we need to resist more than anything.
This is a very, I think, Orwellian situation that we're seeing. And what everything that I read there, right, is every right-winger's fear of what they're going to call communism. They're going to say, that's communism. That's what the left wants. They want, and this is by design. So what the intelligence community, the intelligence apparatus has done is they have taken fascism and rebranded it for a new era of idiots, that these idiots that are on Twitch and these bots and these type and the younger generation, into calling it, you know, this new ability to come together and make it easier and accessible. So they've rebranded it, and they know that they're going people on the right are going to say that's communism, so that people are going to hate any idea of socialism, of collective living, and they're going to equate that to fascism. Because when you hear about communism from a lot of people who hate it, you say, oh, you don't own any property, you just everything's free and all this stuff. But that's not what communism isn't supposed to be, that you all are exactly the same, you don't have individual thought, that you just do what somebody tells you to do, and that you're entirely dependent on the government. No, the whole goal is a stateless society where you're free and you have abundance, and you're a free person. You have your own thoughts, but you live in a community where you can just let people be. That's the whole goal. It's a sort of utopian goal that, for obvious reasons, hasn't been accomplished. But at the same time, it's being catered to this lockdown left as this is what we want. We want, right? Oh, we want free transportation. Of course we do. We want health care. Of course you do. You don't want to pay rent. Of course you don't. But what happens is when you achieve that, when you get that under a surveillance state, when you get that under an oligarchy, you don't have what you think you're going to get. What you have is fascism. You have a totalitarian state that you're entirely dependent on. They give you all of these things as long as you play by their rules, as long as you do not dissent, as long as you think like within the narrative that they want you to think. That's not communism. That's not socialism. That's fascism. That is living in a totalitarian state. And so the intelligence community, which always thinks about 5 or 6 steps ahead of everybody else, has understood that the opposition to the current system is so great that they have to rebrand it to make you fall in love with more surveillance and more authoritarianism. And it's working wonders in the United States and a lot of the West of Europe. So that's exactly what that is, because they're going to frame it as, well, we want free public transportation. We want all of this. But think about the fact of what just Pasta said. They want us separated. The whole point of cooking, the whole point of being able to go to school, to being able to work and get out of your house, is to have human-to-human contact interactions. We're a social creature. We're not supposed to be separated into complete little boxes and not have human interaction. That's why there's so many people with mental health issues, because of the way the system is. So they're saying that you're basically going to like this situation because you're going to have everything and you're not going to complain. But it's a very dark mirror, very Orwellian way to live, because you're not going to be creating or having interactions with anybody but yourself, and you're going to have to do what you're told, because the moment you don't, you're not going to have access to these things. And also notice how they framed the people that didn't want to be a part of this society. Oh, they're out there. We lost some people. They turned against the government. So, forget those people. We're here. Overall life is better. I've read countless of post-apocalyptic books because that was my favorite genre when I was growing up, and I studied obviously English literature. And one of the things I see right now with the world we're living in is that in one of the books that I read from a long time ago, The Giver, it was one of the first books I read when I was like in elementary school, and it's about a society where people live and it's all in black and white, and everybody is told who they're going to be when they grow up. Like you're told you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be this, you're going to be a birth mother, you're going to be like, you have no choice, right? And the moment you can't listen to music doesn't exist. It's all these things. And you're supposed to have a family pod. It's not your real parents because there's birth mothers there. And so the moment a person starts to have dissent, that person is threatening the whole society and everything. We used to have hate. We used to have war. We used to have this and that. We don't have it anymore. But at what cost? At what cost are you having that? At what cost? At the cost of not having free thought, at the cost of not being able to have dissent, at the cost of having your entire existence controlled and surveilled. And that is not a positive. That is an apocalyptic, post-awful, Orwellian, whatever situation. And it's something we should be mindful of. And it's not at all a conspiracy. They're telling you right now, that's where we're headed.
We need to have more conversations about this. We have to do shows in the future about this, because one of the things that's always talked about, why a lot of people are not crazy about any Marxism or Marxist theory, is the fact that they would say that it's too much centralized power that wants to eliminate anybody who thinks differently than them. They want to eliminate the bourgeoisie. They want to eliminate the synthetic parties. And that's like an argument that people have within the whole communist, socialism, capitalist debate, right? Like capitalism is supposed to lead to choices where you don't get those choices with communists. And that's why I always like when you talk about these things, because you describe yourself as an anarcho-communist, and that means like pretty much no government with commune society. And I've always said before, in the past, that's why we need to have somewhat of a mixed economy of sorts. There is kind of a debate there. Marxism is also about getting rid of a system that doesn't work, that constantly has failed. There's a lot of people who are scared about that, getting rid of that system that doesn't work, that has failed, because it has worked for some people, and people are holding on to what they believe are assets and money, whatnot, and they figure that it's all going to be just washed away and going to the general public. But I mean, there is discussions for that, because it's something that Steve said the other day when I said, well, that's not really what it's about. For me, when I look at any type of Marxist theory, when I look at socialism and communism, it's about seizing the means of production, right? It's about the workers getting there, right? The proletariat making sure that they get their due so they have more power, and not just people who are sitting up at the boards, a small amount of people deciding what's best for a large amount of people. But that's where even Steve says, well, that's the hook. You know what I'm saying? And Shadow Band Refugee, I know he's got a lot of words to say about this, about Stalinism, about centralized power. So this debate kind of will continue to move on. I'm glad we're starting to have these debates. We have to continue to figure out what's what, because we are in a different state right now, right? The technocratic boom has changed everything. That when you talked about Marxist theories years ago, well, the technocratic boom changes a lot of what we have to do moving forward. We have to make sure that there's not too much centralized power that's going to control us. And at the same time, make sure that we understand that there has to be a floor. Somehow there has to be a level. When John asked us that day when we were talking, when we were in Honduras, well, what system works best? I said any type of system that we can make and we can build together that will reduce the suffering of people around the world. There's too much suffering. That's what we want at the end of the day, is to see less people suffering, see less people homeless, see less people dying of lack of health care, less people dying around the world of water and food. That is what we want. We have to figure out a way to work towards that society. And we have to see what's in front of us, because we are clearly getting duped from time to time, fam.